Okay, guys, welcome. So today is our second session and our final, well, most probably, if we get it all done, our final session on the module of thought. So last week we went through the different types of thought. It was only last week, so I went, maybe a couple of weeks ago, depending on which one you're talking about. But yeah, I won't go too much around that, but we talked about thought, we talked about creative thought, and we talked about the one thought, okay? There's a lot to really ponder on that. I was just speaking to Nev on the phone, and we were having a conversation about what we're actually doing here. And I guess I might start off with that as a reminder. In OMG, the first 6 months of the program is all about that internal process. The second 6 months is all about the external process. And in OMG, I talk about that, to be able to live this or to be the one, it's about bringing the internal and the external to become one of the same. You're bringing the internal and the external to become one of the same. And in this level of training, that's what we're doing. We are bringing the internal and the external one of the same. So when we first kicked off with this level of training, one of the things that I said to you guys is, this work, yes, it's always been about a knowing. You cannot really prove it. You cannot necessarily understand it. And it's even very difficult to share it. Because how do you share something that you cannot necessarily even think what it is, right? So yet, for the last 10, 15 years, I've been feeling this knowing, and I have been describing it, and I have been sharing it through words. So, and what I realized is that the more I had the ability to live this, the more I had the ability to articulate it into words. The more I had the ability to articulate it into words, the more I had the ability to live this. So, this level of training is all about getting you guys to now begin to understand what you once knew to be true. It's just a knowing. It starts off with just a knowing. It's just a feeling, and the feeling you would describe it as, I just know it. I just know it to be true. Go back 6 months ago when we first started this level of work. It's like, I know you know it, but I want you to be able to understand what you know. Now, I know your understanding will always be limited, and that's why you first just know it. But your ability to understand this to some depth, to some level, right, will determine your ability to live it, right? So that's what we're doing, and that's why we started to bring in sometimes science reference points, or tangible reference points. And of course, we have some intellectual people in here, like Harold, who might explain different things. And Nev, Nev and I had, a little bit of a conversation right now about the quote that I've got you guys to ponder on from Einstein. And there's a reason I got you to ponder on that quote. What I might get you to do, Harold, I might get you to turn your camera off, if that's all right, because there's flashing going on. It's like a disco. Woo-hoo. All the lights while the car's moving. So, I guess I start with a reminder for you today, a reminder of what we're actually doing, what the process is. One of the biggest things in this level of work is to in manifestation, we talked about there's a creation level, there's a manifestation level, and there's a transformation level. In other words, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, whatever you want to call it, stage. I like to call it stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, because life is like a stage. But whatever you want to call it, that third reference point, you know, that third stage or that third phase, the transformation phase in manifestation, or the phase 3 that I talk about, is when you are being the one. You know, this is all about becoming the one. Niv was asking me about, you know, the question. He had a question about, you know, how he has these epiphanies, and suddenly, you know, where did the epiphany come from? Where did this realization that we talk about, this realization, like suddenly you realize, and you know, you now know. Where are these little epiphanies that are coming up that Niv was talking about? And I was like, well, this training, what we're doing is continuously allowing you to shift or bend your mind to become the one. When you first introduced to this work, right, you are connecting to the one. You are using the infinite power, right? I used the breathing example just recently with Niv, when I talked about when we first understood infinite breathing, or breathing infinite source. You're understanding yourself as the drop. So therefore I talk about you are like a balloon, and you are inflating the balloon as you breathe in, and because as you breathe in, you're breathing in infinite source. But because you're not the infinite source, then you breathe the infinite source back out to where the infinite source is, and the infinite source is all around you, everywhere, but in you, but as you, I should say. So, you know, that's that breathing technique is completely toppled for you to actually grasp, you know, and it begins to topple when I ask you the question. You know, I had someone ask me the question about this different style of breathing technique in the OMG Q&A I did yesterday, and they were a little bit confused about it. And they're like, I don't get it, because I'm breathing in infinity. So, you know, now you're telling me I just don't get the other way. And I'm like, well, I asked this question: if the one were to breathe, if it required breath, how would the one breathe? And the topple happened for him. He was just like, he got it. And again, just a reminder, we're trying to go, well, how would the one think? If the one requires thought or uses thought, right? Because it doesn't require it. If it uses, how would it think? You know, and that's what we're doing. We're getting you to bring your attention, your awareness to being the one, rather than connecting to it and using it, right? So, and if you go back to the very first time you heard this message, and for some of you it's 5 years ago plus, right? Many years ago. I mean, the idea of being the one would have been, you would have almost done that to it. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not the one, you know. There would have been some of that happening. You know, I know the one, I feel it. It's there sometimes, but I'm not the one, you know. But remember, in the WTF experience, and again, this is kind of going down memory lane for a sec, just to remind you, in the WTF experience, we talk about that you are here to be an infinite being in a finite world. Infinite being means you are the one in the finite world, meaning the world of separation, the world of duality. But you're not not just this body. You're the essence, the source, the being. You know, so you feel yourself as an infinite being in a finite world. Yes, you still have gravity. Yes, you still have time. Yes, you still, in the story, were born, and one day you will die. So there's a finite world, but you're an infinite being in a finite world. All right, you came here to be infinite. So just a little bit of a reminder before we get going. So look, there was a lot of homework in the last session and lots of pondering. I will encourage you guys to continuously to post that on the Facebook group page, so we can see each other's individual pondering and where we're at with it. And don't try to it's about you expressing for yourself. So don't try to think to yourself, oh, mine's not worthy of being up there, or whatever. It's just ridiculous thought you might have, because that is a ridiculous thought. So I encourage you guys to share the homework there. You're pondering there, and I'll be reading them more and getting involved in the conversation there. Now, the pondering that I've just asked you guys to ponder on, the quote by Einstein on relativity. No, I can't even say that word right now. I struggle. Anyway, Einstein's theory. Okay.
Relativity.
That's it. Thank you. Now, I asked you guys to ponder on that. And, you might have found different versions of that. Other people who have studied Einstein and maybe simplified it. Now, it doesn't matter, right? I'm not really using that to describe science for you. I'm using it as a reference point, okay? Because we are now trying to understand what we know. So, a good place to bring more understanding sometimes is science. Science is a great place. If you can explore science, I don't know, maybe you're a mathematician and you explore that. Maybe, I don't know, like personally, I don't really explore all that, but from time to time, I'll come across something and I'll relate it to where I am and how I use it in the metaphysical world, right? So that's what we're doing. I mean, if you think back to Newton's law of motion, is it? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I mean, do you know where that relates to in this work? I mean, it's Newton, right? And it's something that I've spoken about. I've even spoken about in the WTF experience or earlier versions of OMG. Every action has an equal and opposite force or equal and opposite reaction, right? I mean, that's duality. We talk about that, if you're in the duality mindset, and if you've got this success that you've had, then be sure that you're going to experience failure somewhere in your life to bring you back into equilibration. That's stuff that I talk about in the WTF experience, right? Did I get my theory from that? No, I use that as a reference point to go, hey, in the physical world, that's what's happening, but it's also happening in the metaphysical world, right? This is what actually takes place in your mind, in your mindset. You start to build yourself up, then the universe or who you are brings things into your life so you can beat yourself up to get back into the neutrality or equilibration. Right? You're equilibrating your mind. You're finding yourself, you need to, and I talk about that you need to find balance in the world, right? In order to transcend the balance. I also say that balance is the prison, which most people are like, well, hang on a sec. When the first time they hear that, they go, well, the balance is not prison. Well, think about it. It's totally balanced. You can never go outside the balance. You have a massive positive, you're going to create equal negative. So is that not the balance is the walls of the prison. Now, that does not mean that you are not to find balance, right? You need to find the prison before you can transcend the prison. You need to find the prison before you can free yourself from the prison. You need to find balance before you can transcend the balance. So the balance is the prison, right? And the first time someone hears that, it's just like, well, no. Because A, they've never heard of that before, and B, it just sounds outrageous because balance is a good thing. I'm not saying it's not, right? But we're not here to live in balance. We're here to find it so we can transcend it. You need to find the prison before, because most people don't even know they're in a prison. They don't know that there's a prison around their own mind. Right? They don't know they're in equilibration. They don't know that it's all completely balanced. They experience high positives and they don't know that with that is going to come equal and opposite force called the negative, right? Now, there's no such thing as positive and negative, but you create that in your mind to bring yourself into equilibration. So I'm using that as a strong reference point. That's Newton right there, right? So, this quote, this theory from Einstein is something that I heard you know, probably months ago, and it just stood out for me. And I knew I'm going to talk about it at some point, and this is where I want to talk about it again as a strong reference point. So if you're a science guy and you're like, you know, trying to break it down scientific, it's not. I'm just using it as a strong reference point. All right. Otherwise, you might get a little bit lost in it. Right. As Jari said on the WhatsApp call, on the, you know, going down the rabbit hole. Okay, it's just just like Newton is a reference point. I'm not getting you to go study Newton and physics and every action has an equal. I'm not getting you to study that. I'm just using that as a strong reference point. I don't need you to go study Newton. But when Einstein. But when I read that quote from Einstein, you know, it really stood out for me, you know, from a pondering point of view, because I know I'm using that in my reality. You know, in the Matrix, they talk about some rules are there to be bent, some rules are there to be broken. You remember that, okay? Okay, that was just a movie. Okay, you get the point though, right? The movie had strong reference point. Some rules are there to be broken, some rules are there to be bent, right? I talk about this in the WTF, you know, all throughout OMG. I relate to this. I say that when, you know, when you know, whether, I don't know exactly what the words I would say, but there's a point where you know, when what's more real on the inside and you have the willingness or the ability to follow that or become in alignment with what you feel internally, your world externally bends, or in Einstein's theory conversation, curves. Right? But I like to use the word bend because I always say that. The world outside of you bends to mirror the world inside of you. Okay? But when you're not in alignment with the world inside of you, you are then moved by the outside. Should we read Einstein's quote? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, that is what I'm relating it to. Obviously, when I shared this, Niv's scientific head went, and he's like, what are we talking about here? So I needed to explain that to Niv, and he's like, oh, you know, and we had a good conversation. So that's the quote I got you to ponder on, and I'm going to break it down for you. And I've rewritten that quote so you can understand it from a metaphysical point of view, but I'm just giving you a reference point. Remember when I talk about that in the WTF, I say that when you are in alignment with yourself, when your internal world is in alignment, or when you have the willingness to follow the decision that's already been made, whatever reference you can find that I talk about in the WTF, I say when that happens, your world outside of you bends to, and I use the word to mold your feeling or to reflect what is being decided inside of you. But when there's no alignment there, right, the world outside of you is moving you. The drop cannot move the ocean, yet the ocean is moving the drop. You're just being moved. Yeah? Okay, so hold on to any questions for a sec. Let's just revisit the Einstein quote. The ponder was, matter tells space and time to curve. Now, Niv said it actually says how to curve. Doesn't matter. Maybe my quote is not 100% there. I think that the correct quote is matter tells space and time how to curve. Whatever. How to curve, I don't know. But in Niv's scientific mind, he had that means two different things. If it's how to curve, it means something else to curve, right? But the quote is, matter tells space and time to curve, or I'll put in brackets, to bend, right? I'm breaking it down. It's my interpretation, right? Space and time tells matter to move, right? Now, break that down to what I just shared with you, okay? Yeah, let's have a quick break that down. I mean, do I need to explain what I just shared with you again, or do you get that, right? Let's just read the quote again. Matter tells space and time to curve. Space and time tells matter to move. Okay? when you're in alignment within yourself, your external world bends to mold your internal world, right? So you first feel it, right? Or you decide it. And we'll talk about that in a second, the feeling and decision. Because I remember when I talked to you about one thought, I said there's no feeling or decision. I said there's no feeling or decision to initiate, just to be clear, because I got a question come through from Kira as well about where feeling lands in all this, right? There's a feeling the moment you act on it. But there's no feeling to guide you, right? Because think about it. Think about it. Understand what I'm saying to you. You as the one, why would you need a feeling? You don't need a feeling to guide you. You don't need to follow your intuition. That is when you're the drop. You are following your intuition. Now, I'm not saying don't follow your intuition, right? We use our intuition in our everyday living, right? Because you're going to have points where you're experiencing yourself as a drop and you have no desire or requirement to stand up as the one, right? But there is points where you will be like, for me, when, again, I was talking about this in the OMG group or somewhere. I've been doing talks every day recently, so I forget which one's which, but when I'm on stage or when I'm sharing this content, I need to be the one, right? I can't share it. Me as Amir can't share this. I need to be in complete congruency, okay? And as I'm sharing it, I can then ponder on it or think about it, or this one's for Kira, feel it. I'm feeling it as I'm sharing it. I'm not following a feeling to share it. I start and the feeling, right? Now the feeling's there the moment I've expressed it. Like when I talk about true unconditional love is when you express the love towards something, you feel the love for yourself within yourself. Therefore, you don't need it to be reciprocated back to you because you're feeling it in the giving of it. In fact, when you give it, that's when it moves through you and you go, "Ooh, I feel so much love." Okay, you feel it for yourself within yourself, and therefore you're not looking for it to be reciprocated as a need by someone else. Okay, I won't go on a tangent there, but I'm just using that as a reference point. So, the closer and closer we get into the middle of this journey for this new content that we're sharing together, the more and more you may realize it's about you being the one at this, third phase of thought, which I talk about as one thought. And again, I didn't talk about that. I kind of created confusion when you start to think creative thought as phase 2 or logical thought as, phase 1 and one thought as phase 3, because then you start to think it's higher and lower. It's not, it's all together. In fact, I talked about that logical thought and creative thought coming together becomes one thought. Okay. So, or if you like, when it is one thought, it's not limited by barriers of it requiring to be logic or it requiring to be creative. You don't need to understand it, nor do you need to feel it. You're just being it. You're just doing it. You guys saw that video that Niv shared about the American NFL player. And, it was brilliantly said, right? That in that moment, right, he is being the one in that moment, right? The rules or the reality is bending, like it's bending around him, right? And he's not thinking about it nor feeling it. Sure, he may have a feeling as is being expressed or as it's being actioned, right? But there is no thought, right? And if there's any thought, it's singular. You're like, step there. Like it's you get my point, right? And that is a very profound video, and I will probably keep it and share it for future people who actually end up watching this content. So so I guess that's there to answer Kira's question about, and some of you may have had that question. Well, where does feeling stand in all this? Like the drop asks, where does feeling stand, so I could follow it, right? I want to follow. The ocean doesn't, or the one doesn't look for a feeling to follow. It is the feeling, and as it expresses, as it moves, as it bends, the feeling is being felt. Just like when you do what's true for you, all right? When you do what's true for you, you feel the love within yourself for yourself, and therefore you have no attachment to how or if it's been reciprocated, all right? You feel it in yourself for yourself through the expression or through the action of doing what is true for you, okay? So back to this quote. Right? If I was to break down Einstein's quote so we can grasp it in a metaphysical manner or an idea, I would do it this way. All right. I hope you got what I'm saying. I hope you can relate it to how your reality bends. I hope you've got that. And if you haven't, go back to listen to that, and maybe I'll revisit that. All right. But your thought, and again, you'll know which thought I'm talking about. Your thought and feelings, right, when in alignment, tell space and time to bend. Space tells matter to move in time. Okay. Now, let's break it down in our language. What's space? Energy. Space is the infinite ocean. What's matter? The perception of being small, the perception of being the drop of the ocean, the perception of being, form, right? Where space is the formless. So when you are in alignment, and that means your thoughts and feeling. Now, I know I say in one thought, there is no thought and feeling, and there isn't, right? So the best way to navigate or maneuver in your reality, right, is remember, one thought is pretty rare. I mean, it does happen, and it happens more and more as you become that, right? And you'll find that you will become that in different areas of your life. I first became that in sharing this. And when I realized, this is how I'm sharing this, this is how this is working, then I can maybe relate it or shine the light of what I'm doing here or what's taking place here in other areas of my life. Okay? And that's what all I've been doing. That's my art. That's what I do. But what I'm doing with you right now, the stuff that I'm sharing with you does not require thought. It just requires me just to be. I just decide, or is this decided that I'm going to share what I'm going to share with you, and then it's there. I'm not thinking about it, right? I don't need to feel it. Most of the times I won't feel it. I will just commence. I will start, and there is the words to share, and the feeling is with those words. Okay. So, and again, I'll send this to you guys, so you don't need to write it down. Just listen right now. Thought and feelings, or thought and let's call it the feeling, if you like, when in alignment, right, tells space and time to bend. What space and time? All right. The space and time is your external reality in time. Right. Remember, everything around you, and this is where your understanding of this helps. Everything around you, even though it's physical form, the physical form is actually space. That then bends. The iceberg begins to change the shape I talk about in the WTF experience. It's easy for an iceberg to change the shape. If you realize the iceberg is not the iceberg, yet it is the ocean taking form. So it's easy for you to understand then that thought and feelings, when in alignment, tells space in time, right? Or space time, as Niv will call it, to bend. What's it bending to? Bending to what you think and feel. But how difficult is to have the thought and feeling in alignment? I'll come back to that in a second, because that's the catch. All right? Because people can't get the thought and feeling in alignment. That's the journey. We'll come back to that in a second. The other thing I said to you is that space tells matter to move in time. So space, the energy, right, will move matter in time, right? Something to go ponder on. But I just want to quickly go back to the thought and feeling in alignment, because as you guys know, most people, when you first start this journey, they don't even know what the feeling is. It happens randomly or by fluke, right? Because it's a moment where they've experienced happiness for no reason. It's a moment where they've experienced just being in the moment, if you like. And, they would say, maybe it was random. Of course, it's not random, right? But the reason why most people can't find the feeling is because there's so many different emotions. Okay, so when someone first starts this work, it's about neutralizing or equilibrating those emotions. Okay, so that's what, the whole reclaiming power and all the work that we're doing is to get to the point where you are removing the cobwebs that cloud the feeling, right? Now, the thought also can't be influenced based on what was, based on a limitation. So you have a moment when your thought and feeling align, you then bend your reality. Okay. Now, I'm going to open up for questions, and we'll open up questions around what we just spoke about, all right? And there may be lots of questions. So before I do, just so I keep it segmented in what we're doing here, after our last session, okay? And that was, let me go to last week. We talked about where your attention goes and where the idea of where your attention goes, you go, right? And the pondering question was, do thoughts ignite your attention, or does your attention ignite your thoughts? Okay. Now, I'm just going to tell you what I've written here. The idea is just to get your pondering going. Okay. It's a little bit of a trick question, if you haven't noticed. Do thoughts ignite your attention, or does your attention ignite your thoughts? In other words, is it you placing your attention somewhere and then you think about something, or are you thinking about something and your attention goes there, right? This has been purely a little bit of a, I want to say a mind fuck. It's just been practicing to ponder. It's a complex thing to ponder, right? And because there's a little trick question to that, right? Because Your thoughts are your attention, and your attention is your thoughts. Whatever you're thinking about, your attention is on. Wherever your attention is, your thought is focused on. But again, I'm just getting you to use the muscle. Use the muscle, because I mean, think about it. Your attention somewhere, then your thought is focused on that. If you're playing a sport, or you're playing archery, and is it archery, or you're playing shooting or something as a sport, you bring your attention somewhere, right? Your thought is then focused on that. Now, the idea, like, let's say I'm doing archery, you're taking aim, right? Your attention goes somewhere. You're picking that middle of the big round, target. But if you think about it too much, right? Because when your attention goes there, so does your thought, right? But you want to be able to let go or aim and fire without thought. And the ability for someone's ability to do that with less thought or with no thought will create an outstanding result. Bang, right in the middle, for example, right? So here's the thing. So I just wanted to point out one point here is you pull the archery back, you pull the elastic back or whatever it's called, right? You got your arrow, you point it back where your attention goes, which is right in the middle of the target, right? The moment you put your attention there, you're focused there. So your thought is then focused to where your attention is. It's the same, right? Now, where I want you to, where maybe you would have pondered a little bit further, right, is there's a difference between awareness and your attention. Okay? Because in that moment, if you can then bring your awareness to, not to that point, the awareness is more the space that is held in the experience of the whole thing. That's the awareness is what allows you to become one with that point. Okay? That's different. And maybe you're pondering took you there, maybe not. All right? Awareness is the space that the thought or the imagination or that feeling is formed in. Right? Awareness is just space. It's you creating space within the space, because ultimately there is just space, right? But you might be sucked into a thought within that space. I won't get too confusing here, but just know that your awareness is space. Your greater your awareness, the bigger your space. Okay? The bigger your space, the easier or more effortless your experience. I just want to see what I've written here. Just make sure I've covered everything with you. Awareness is different. Awareness is the space where your thought, feeling, and imagination form in. You imagine in the formless, you think about the form. I'll say that again, actually. You imagine the formless, you think about what's taken form. Just write that down when you re-listen to this, and just ponder on that a bit longer. You imagine the formless, you think about what's taken form. Okay, so just please understand that, awareness is different to your attention. Your attention will go somewhere, your thoughts go there. Your thoughts will go somewhere, your attention's already there. They're one of the same. To me, that experience is one of the same. But if your attention goes somewhere and with that you bring your awareness, that's different, right? So if I, for example, and Harold will relate to this, when we're landing a plane, when we're lined up on final to come in for final approach for our landing, we focus purely on the numbers. The numbers is, they see the numbers at the end of the runway or the threshold, or also known as the piano key. My focus goes purely on that, right? Now, when I say purely on that, it does switch between different things because I've got to check the airspeed, I've got to check my power, check, there's things I'm doing within the cockpit. But I'm single-mindedly, every time I look back outside, I'm single-mindedly, I mean, and in my plane is probably different to what Harold flies as well, he flies an Airbus, and, in my plane, fixed pitch, just a single engine propeller, I'm just focused on the numbers, right? And I'm just adding power or reducing power to make me the right speed and the right height and changing my attitude. Anyway, my point is this, I'm getting lost in what I'm trying to say, right? If my attention is on the numbers, right, and I have no awareness or no space, then I will begin to think about it, right? And the thinking will take me away from the feeling of it, okay? And you'll notice sometimes when someone's a newer pilot, they'll do what's called throttle bashing. They add power, reduce power, add power, reduce power. Oh my God, they're doing that. And the plane is doing a little bit of this in the sky, right? But as you begin to have more practice with something, you have more space, okay? In other words, you have more awareness. Your attention is there, but you have an awareness. So that allows you just to feel it. And when I'm on approach, I hardly touch the throttle. I set it, I set my attitude, and I'm just there. And it just kind of just comes. Nothing, there's no throttle bashing. Of course, once I'm going into my flare to get into the landing position, of course, my hand goes on the throttle, and, Harold will know, he'll go and retard his throttle. But yes, but you get what I'm saying? Maybe I shouldn't have gone into aviation, go back to the archery if you like, right? But there's a difference between your attention going somewhere without space versus your attention going there with space, right? And space is awareness, right? In fact, all this work you're doing right now is expanding your space, is expanding your awareness. Awareness of what? Awareness of who you are, right? You are becoming aware. And I was speaking to Niv about this. That this training is not about you becoming the one. This training is about you becoming aware that you are the one. You know that, right? I don't need to tell that to you guys. All right. So, at the end of the day, I believe that thought is energy. And what we do here is we move energy. And if you're not moving energy, right, then what you're doing is being moved by thought. You're being moved by the energy. It's a little bit to ponder on. That to me, it's simple, yet this is probably the most difficult module, because it really requires you, or it invites you, rather not requires you, it invites you to understand it, and once you get sucked into the thinking that becomes a bit of a web, it's very difficult to, because it can take away any awareness that you had. So remember as well, another reference point for you is that when you are pondering, you may have a question, you may pose a question, and all you're doing is giving awareness to that, or you're giving space to that. That's it. You're not looking for the answer. I always say don't look for the answer from the place you ask the question from, right? You ask the question, and then you just give it space. In other words, you allow it to be. You don't look for the answer, right? That's awareness. And then suddenly you have this realization, you have this pondering that starts. And remember, realizations are those, a big realization are those big epiphanies. So that is our thought conversation. now open up for Q&As, questions, comments, contributions. Let me know where it's landed for you. How are you feeling? What's up? Was it too heady? I know this can be very heady, even though my conversation is not heady. Trying to understand it can be very heady. Yeah, open up your mics. Let's have a convo.
Don't everybody respond at once, huh?
Yeah, it's always the case.
Yeah. I found it difficult, this module on thoughts. And I think just because it's so easy to get trapped in your thoughts. But I thought the video that Niv shared really kind of helped me drop into the conversation, because I was just wondering, like, why do we even have to talk about this? And when I watched the video, I realized how what the opportunity is when you can transcend thought. So that made a huge impact on me, was that just being able to see what could happen in your life if you could be in that place where. And I loved what you said tonight about having your thought and feeling in alignment.
Yeah,
that really makes sense to me too. So
yeah, I mean, for me, to be completely honest with you, I'd rather not even talk about this, because nothing really needs to be said. But if I was not to talk about it, I would say things like, I don't know, I just do it, I don't think about it. And that's what we're doing here. We're like kind of dissecting the idea of, well, why do you not think about it? Or how do you not think about it? Or why do you feel the need not to think about it? Or, and that's all this is just dissecting it to understand thought more intelligently or more intuitively. And, but it is.
I think it didn't, saying that when you said that at the beginning didn't give me a clue as to what the possibility is of being able to say, I don't know, I just think about it. That possibility is pretty amazing when you actually look at what can happen when, when you transcend thoughts. It's, it's like you can take whatever you're doing to a whole nother level.
Yeah. And it's not so, like, as much as it's rare, like, it's rare because you don't experience it in all areas of your life. You might, someone might experience it in dancing. Someone might, like, I've talked about, for me, I might experience it in aerobatic flying. When I first started, there was a lot of thinking that was involved. And then my instructor was going, stop thinking about it, just do it. Well, how do you just do it? But what happens is you practice, and over practicing, what happens is you start to become comfortable. So you start to have more space, more awareness, more situational awareness in the air, right? And as you have more awareness, you suddenly find that everything slows down. And because you have that space and it's not being consumed by thoughts, you start to feel, and you begin to do the maneuvers via feeling. And then you get a younger pilot or a younger aerobatic student who comes up and goes, hey, when you do this maneuver, what are you actually doing? What input do you have? And then you almost have to go, well, hang on, because you don't think about it. And you almost have to go back to, well, actually, this is what I do. And then you talk about it, because you talk about something that you're not thinking about, but you kind of got to check in and stop and go, because your first response is, I don't know, I just do it. So I remember when I was learning to fly tailwheel, you guys have heard the story in the past, but when I learned to fly tailwheel in an aircraft called the Pitt Special, which is one of the most difficult aircraft you can take off on land, in particularly land. And one of the things that takes place is that when you put full power, you want to get the tail up. It improves your visibility. But what happens is you've got this gyroscopic effect that kicks in the moment you lift the tail. It's if you've ever got a bicycle wheel and you've spun it around and you've done that to it, that's what the gyroscopic effect is, right? So So what happens is that as soon as I lift the tower, the aircraft wants to go to the left, right? So then I would ask my instructor, well, how much to stop that? I would have to press right rudder. And I'll go, well, how much right rudder? But the first time I was going to do it, how much right rudder is it going to need? He goes, as much as it needs. You know, that's, you can't, and you only know that once you've done it. It's just as much as it needs. That's, you know, you know, at first it's a thinking process, but now it's just what happens. It's just what you do. It becomes like driving a car, and you have space to ponder or take your attention elsewhere, you know?
I think it was also clarifying last week when you talked, because I was thinking, well, would there ever be a time when thoughts were not really important or not necessary? But actually, when I was on the call the last time, just recognizing that thoughts are kind of the mundane things we need to do, the mundane chores of everyday life. So they're not ever going to really go away or become useless. But maybe for the things that are really important, you do transcend thought. I don't know.
Well, remember that what I spoke about last week or last session is that thought is just it's a tool, it's a vehicle that you have for your different experiences as a human being, as a infinite being in a finite world, whatever you want to see it as, right? Just like your body is. You can't say, well, do I really need my body? Like, I'm not my body, so why the hell am I using my body? Like, yeah. Well, you came to have that experience as that body. So it's the same as thought. It's just most people, what happens is they don't deal with the emotions that are taking place, which is igniting a lot of thought. And they're using the wrong thought when I say the wrong thought, they're using a thought that is designed to be for logic or designed to be maybe for mundane things, maybe for autopilot stuff, but they're trying to use that to create. It's right. That's not the thought you use. And no one, there's a different sensations with those thoughts. So it's about having an understanding how it feels different. One is lighter, one is singular, I would say, one is, it's continuous and it's fine to have those thoughts, to be continuous for, just that everyday stuff that you use. But what happens as you become more and more aware, as you become more and more conscious, is that your awareness expands. So even though with those everyday thoughts that's taking place, you have so much awareness, like where if your awareness was limited, you are those thoughts. You think those thoughts is who you are. But as your awareness expands, as you become the observer, remember one of the homework was to observe your thought. And once you've observed your thought, what's to observe your thought again? It's because you start to become aware that there is all this space around that thought. So therefore, those thoughts don't consume you. They're still there. It's just they don't consume you, right? And it doesn't feel like, you have heavy thoughts. Mm-hmm. So that's why
it's kind of brutal though to observe your thoughts and then observe them some more, because it's it's just like, wow, there's so much going on there.
Well, yeah, but just begin to observe the space around the thought, like and just notice the thought, but just understand at this point, like as you're expanding, there is some thoughts when you first started that would have just consumed you more and were more heavy, and they're lighter now.
Yeah, so absolutely.
That's what's happening as you're becoming more conscious, you're becoming more aware. You show up with awareness. You show up. You're observing the thoughts with awareness. So the thoughts aren't consuming you.
Yeah.
But what happens is most people think they need to shut their thought off to have that not thinking process. And really, I found that's not what you're here to do. You're here to become bigger than the thought. You're here. It's like ego. Most people think they need to kill the ego or, have no ego. Well, no, it's just you're here to realize that the ego, it was the shadow and it was never in control. Imagine looking at your own shadow and going, oh my God, it's going to catch me, or it's doing what you want it to do. Or I use the example of becoming, the ego being a guard dog, a Doberman or a German Shepherd growling at you, and then it becomes a Chihuahua. It's still there. And what's happened is not that ego got smaller, but you became bigger. What do I mean by you became bigger? Your awareness expanded.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the game here. And it's good to understand it. It's good to understand this is what's actually taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Amir.
Yes, Chrissy. How are you?
I pondered a lot about something you said last week, which was that with one thought there isn't even a feeling, and then maybe this week, are you saying that it's that the feeling and thought are in alignment? So like it's not, you don't have to like go and check in with your feeling, it's just all one.
Yeah, when that moment when you're like the video that we're talking about that Niv shared of the NFL player, that moment is the thought and feeling are one, right? So I was going to use the word when someone is playing instinctively, right? But it happens so quick. But when someone is playing instinctively or having a moment where they are being instinctive, you'd like to think that you're being instinctive because you're following a feeling, but what's been happening is what's taking place, and what's actually happening is you're moving, and then you're having a feeling, and then you think to yourself, well, I moved that way because I had that feeling. You gotta look for moments in your life where wasn't you. There's things, maybe you're almost in a car accident. Now maybe you're you're in a dangerous situation where you thought, oh, I'm screwed here. I don't know. There's different moments in my life where I know like that wasn't me. Like like. Yeah, I mean, when I relate to that point, I find that there is this alignment that takes place in me. The thought and feeling are on the same vibration, if you like.
There is a magnet I bought the year actually that I ended up meeting you. I went to this retreat center called Kripalu, and in their gift shop they had a magnet, and on it it said like the title said integration, and then it said happiness is when what you think, what you feel, and what you do are in alignment. I think that's what it said, and it was like one of the yoga from like the Yoga Sutras, like an ancient text or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had that on my fridge for forever. I don't know what happened to it now, but it's interesting because like I feel like it's like dropping in like what that really meant to me, and was on my fridge for so long. And it's interesting because I met you and started doing this work just like a few months after that.
Yeah. What was it again? What you think, what you do, and what you what?
I think it said happiness is when what you think, what you feel, and what you do are in alignment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.